I'm Collin West, and this is how you sell without selling out. Rogers that.
Hi, everybody. I'm Rogers Healy, and welcome to Rogers That, a podcast dedicated to selling without selling out. I've got a bio to read, but I'm gonna freestyle for a second. I first met Collin West in, I think, 2000 or 2001, and a word that over the course of this conversation you will all experience this. Collin's a stud. I don't use that word very often, but he's a stud. And the best part about Collin is he knows he's a stud in the most humble way. I have been obsessed with leaders since I was a kid. I didn't understand what it was like to be a leader until college. But Collin has always exuded this very gentle greatness about him. And I've always wanted to be a part of it. We never were super close, but I think we've had a mutual respect of each other since our days of SMU, and was able to always read about him, his accomplishments. And when you think of a big thinker and you think of a big doer, you think of people like Collin. And I think that in life, very few people have big ideas. Very few people actually try those ideas. And very few people out of those very few people execute. So Collin, I know his family is his most important accomplishment. And he's done so many things worldly. And this morning we're going to have a conversation. And I'm going to go back and read my bio now so y'all can have a little bit of a LinkedIn background as well. He's the founder and managing partner of Ensemble VC. He's the previous founder of Kauffman Fellows VC Fund, on the founding team of the pioneering data-driven VC firm Correlation Ventures. Some of his prior investments. Ready for this? I'm wearing a Nomad barbecue hat while drinking a goat fuel in a Waterloo. Collin was behind Zoom, Carta, Groww, Icon, Tally, Sidecar Health, and many others. Collin is really smart. I just like stuff. But he's wearing a Mizzen and Main shirt. He casually spends his free time training Brazilian jiu-jitsu, mountain biking, and climbing mountains. Again, words that no one will ever say about me. My wife calls me an indoor cat. My father-in-law only talks to me when he has to, because I don't shoot guns, I don't smoke cigars, and I don't drink whiskey. Collin is a man. He also is a world record holder, ladies and gentlemen, for leading the first ever crossing of the Arctic Ocean. Again, sentences that will never be accomplished by me. His team of 4 rode nonstop and unsupported for 41 days through the biggest ice storm in Arctic history. He's an entrepreneur, a competitor, and he's a stud. So 20 years into the making, Collin, you're my friend. I'm grateful for this morning. How did I do at the intro?
Amazing.
All right.
I need to bring you to every meeting. Thank you.
I could be your hype guy.
Exactly. I appreciate it. And thank you for having me today. I really appreciate it.
No, man, thanks for making the time. This is a gift. But so who is Collin West? Like, again, you're a competitor at heart, and you lead with such a humble, gentle spirit. But get us inside the story.
Sure. Well, I mean, I was born and raised in Plano, just north of Dallas, and as you mentioned, you and I went to SMU together. And after SMU, I kind of started thinking and learning a little bit more about the world. I think a key piece to Collin is trying to go on a lot of adventures and experiencing new things. And so I think my first kind of step into that was backpacking Europe, which I think a lot of people do. And that was kind of the first international flight for me, other than maybe Mexico growing up, and starting to see how other people live and learn a little bit about the world. And as a part of that, ended up starting a couple companies, which were not nearly as successful as your company. I learned a lot about failing quickly, and realized I really didn't know how to build a company, and certainly didn't know how to scale it. So what was my next step? Go get an MBA, which of course is what teaches you how to build a company. Not really. But that was kind of a natural next step for me to kind of figure out and learn the world. And so I moved to Chicago and went to Northwestern for my MBA. And while there, found that next new adventure, which was, it turns out I like startups and building companies, but maybe I like investing in them a little bit more. It's a good use of our SMU finance degree, at least mine was. And as a part of that, built this expedition to go row across the Arctic Ocean, which was a wild expedition, and learned a lot there as well. Yeah.
You just shared pretty much your business obituary in like 25 seconds, but there's so many things to pick apart. So talk about the art of failing, right? And again, someone like me, I was used to failing pretty much my whole life. And so, again, one of the reasons I have these conversations with people is that I think my background was more lethal than yours for the world of business because I wasn't used to being successful at anything. And so, being a great athlete and a great student and being in a great business school and then launching a company and not seeing it succeed, what was that like, that journey? Maybe psychologically.
Yeah, well, I think failure. You got to go try a bunch of stuff and fail a lot. One of my, I'll bring up an interesting topic. One of my friends, Adam Draper, he and I have been building something called the Simulation Commandments, and the question is not if we live in a simulation or not. We can get into that, but if we did live in a simulation, how would you actually live your life? And the point of view is a little bit more. Think about it as if you're playing a video game, like a first person shooter. How do you play that game? Well, you run around and you fail a ton constantly. You try a whole bunch of new things. You maybe try a few side quests. You learn along the way. And I think a lot of people don't really live their life that way. And so kind of the insight behind the Simulation Commandments is this like working model of, well, if we did live in a game, how would you actually lead your life? And a big piece of that is one of the commandments is default movement. So always default to movement. Try something new. Also trust is the token of the realm. So you don't break trust, but also exploit edges in the game map is another kind of couplet in that Simulation Commandments. Go to simulationcommandments.com. There's only 7 so far. We're working on it. But those are kind of some of the things that I think are important to live in your life is just trying a bunch of stuff, failing a bunch. And every now and then you feel forward enough that it looks like, I mean, you give me this amazing opening. Like I've done all this amazing stuff. It's incredible how many things I've messed up and gotten wrong. But I'm just kind of always trying things. So I think that kind of default to movement mentality is pretty key.
Yeah. Which again, you have children, right? Yeah. What's it like leading kids, right? When you want them to win, and my kids are younger, but they're making mistakes. And as a kid myself, still, I don't want to win at everything. But is that hard for you as a leader? Where again, your resume is so stacked, and it's with multi-billion-dollar companies, and you saw something that other people didn't see, which is why you put together a group to go and invest. But again, under the hood, there's some stuff that didn't work. How do you parallel that to being a parent?
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, being a parent is also kind of constant failure. And I also think being a parent and like a lot of things is like going to the gym. I mean, it's actually a workout. And one thing my uncle told me a long time ago when I first had we have identical boys that are now 8, our daughter's 6. And when we first had those little ones, he was like, yeah, you're not a good dad yet. You're not. But like that's the whole part of showing up every day because it's a workout and you become better and better over time. So you just kind of fail into being a pretty good dad. And so it's all about the grind and just kind of showing up. And I think that's, pretty similar for work.
I love it.
Also, venture. I mean, the interesting thing about venture, what's weird is you only really have to be right once a fund. The loss ratios in venture are so high that you can be not fearful of failure. So like when we invested in Zoom Video, I mean, there were so many reasons not to invest in the company, right? It was, who's going to pay for Zoom when Google's giving Hangouts away for free? Like all these objections. No one had ever heard of Zoom. They've all heard of WebEx and all these other products. And it's like, yeah, but like, if it's right, it's a big right. And if it's wrong, like we get to be wrong a few times in venture. And so just kind of like taking that mentality to showing up every day, not having as much fear of failure, to quote Dune, fear is the mind killer. It really is. And so just kind of try and be fearless in what you do and just keep showing up is, I guess, a little bit of an anthem to my life in ways.
So here's a question for later, but I'm going to ask it now. I'll start with me. Like I have a really hard time living in the moment and enjoying when things are going great. And maybe that's my anxiety. Maybe that's lack of sleep. Maybe that's caffeine. Maybe it's just the way that I'm wired. But even you have such a steady mindset to investing. And again, you've hit massive grand slams, Game 7 of the World Series, 2 outs, 2 strikes, but then boom, it hits. So is it enjoyable when that kind of stuff happens, or how do you play that game with yourself?
I have the same problem. Are you ADD like me?
I'm ADHD and dyslexic, and I also found out I have a thing called dyscalculia or something, which means like I'm dyslexic with math. I don't even know, but sure,
Nice.
yes.
Well, we're both ADD and dyslexic, and which, by the way, I think we can go into detail on how that's a superpower.
100%.
But it's the same thing for me. Is like sometimes I have a hard time enjoying the moment, but then when there's something interesting, I have super hyper focus on ADD, and yeah, and so living in the moment is hard.
That was just an ADD moment right there.
Yeah, exactly.
I think you just sang, you like had a song playing in your head, but yeah, living in the moment is hard, right? And what do you celebrate these big wins? Or how do you actually process it where you can pat yourself on the back and give yourself some momentum for the next?
I've actually been thinking a lot about this because everything does feel just like a constant uphill, like continued grind. So even whenever you have a big exit, it's like it comes and goes so quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Like the actual celebration, like, oh yeah, you did it. No, there's always that next thing you still got to raise the next fund. You still got to find the next company. And in life, whenever I do, when I feel like I'm a good dad, there's always that next thing that I'm still trying to learn how to be. And so, I have not solved that problem yet.
Well, do you think that again, the background is so impressive and it's so diverse, is it hard as we get older and our body starts to change too, knowing that maybe you aren't going to do another cross ocean swim? I mean, how do you even play that game with yourself too?
Yeah. Well, you always got to have something that you're excited about. Yeah. If I had to. So like, I'm really excited in September. I'm going to climb Grand Teton. It's certainly not as hard as rowing across the Arctic Ocean. It's something a lot of people do, but it's something I'm looking forward to. It's something that's going to kind of scratch that adventure itch. And then in work, I'm really excited about a couple of the companies that we're working on. We're trying to invest more in. And so kind of always having that next thing with our ADD minds kind of helps. Yeah. But yeah, circling back to that main question, I have no idea how to feel like I've accomplished something. I have no idea where that goes.
Which that's why you're successful too, right?
It's maybe not healthy though. I honestly, it's like when is enough? I have no idea.
Well, I can bring it to music. As you can see, I'm a big music guy, and I feel I've kind of studied music my whole life. Not like I don't know how to sing or write or anything, but I obsess over musicians. And there's a common theme. Don Henley, there's a common theme between musicians that never stop performing, right? They don't have to do it for the money, but they do it for the rush and for the drug, versus people that stop. And the people that stop, they literally die, right? Mick Jagger, Robert Plant, Steven Tyler, Don Henley, these ones that are in their late 70s, they're doing it because they have that burning desire inside, which maybe we're wired similarly, which can't escape it.
In growing up, I had a chip on my shoulder where I was always trying to prove someone wrong. And I found that was like external motivation. That's not really healthy, but you really want this intrinsic motivation or a mission. And so like, for example, for investing in startups, one of the reasons I continue to be so driven is I really think startups are really good for the world. I truly believe that I'd rather live today than even a king in the 1800s. And that's because innovation, no one had a hot shower really until 50 years ago.
Or Zoom.
Yeah. Or Zoom. And if we can, and I think venture, if deployed correctly, really increases the slope of innovation and just moves people up Maslow's hierarchy of needs faster. The problems that we think about today even in our political environment are problems that we have that we're rich enough to think about. That no one was able to think about before because everyone was a little bit lower on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And so as we move up, they become more and more due to the increase in technology. But the asset class, venture capital, is really broken. Like people who invest, RLPs, people who invest in VC, it's really hard to do because people lose money. Like at seed rounds, lose money 80% of the time. So if we don't get better at selecting and more efficient, more money will not flow into the asset class. And that means slower innovation because less money for startups. And so that's the thing that drives me about Ensemble, because we're a data driven venture fund. And I think that's really helped us have a little bit of a higher hit rate and a lower loss ratio. And I think if we're able to scale that up industry wide, that's actually really good for the world. And, it's kind of techno optimist. And, there's a lot of people, there's a lot of reasons to say technology has gotten it wrong, but in general, over time, it's gotten it right. And so that's what I think gets me excited to get up each and every day, is because I think we're actually innovating within the asset class, and that's important.
And that's wisdom. Let's get to Ensemble. So talk, at whatever level you want, but just the processing that y'all have to go through. And I'm sure you get hit up multiple times a day, especially with these companies. Again, you're in, even if it's not a tech person, like they know these companies that you're a part of. But, as far as containing excitement about the next big thing, like how do you go and do that with your team and the process? And maybe walk us through how long it would take to go and commit $1 to something that potentially is the next thing.
Yeah. So the high level thesis for us is it's really all about the team. And I don't think that's unique. I think a lot of people, early stage VCs, believe it's all about the team. There's not really much else. There's no assets in a lot of these companies, and other than the people kind of gathering together. But what's unique about what we do is we use software and AI and machine learning to really help us figure out which teams are the most interesting for us to go spend time with. Because another big problem in venture is it's just not very scalable. So like this year, 250,000 companies are going to fundraise. About half of those will be in the US. So as a VC, like good luck meeting them all, right? And even if you could meet them all, you're just going to meet the founder. Well, I've been a founder. You've been a founder. Were we the most interesting person on our team? Almost certainly no. Definitely not in my case. Maybe for your case you were. But so that's a huge issue. There's a whole bunch of information that you miss as a VC because you're usually just meeting the founders. And so that's something that's really helpful with software, because software is infinitely scalable. So you actually can go and meet every person on every startup team. And so like now we track about 400 different factors on every person on every startup team. And that helps us just effectively just sort the list of potential companies we could meet by an objective quality, which is team quality, which we know empirically. I think we all know internally, but also I can tell you objectively does correlate with success. And then that way I just can have a much shorter list of companies to go spend a lot of time with and hopefully eventually fund. And so it takes us a long time to deploy the capital. That you asked about timing. And that's because we're typically meeting companies well before they're fundraising. We're going outbound and finding them rather than waiting for them to come inbound to us. And then since I'm not on endless sourcing calls with a bunch of companies that maybe aren't interesting for our strategy, I can just spend more time with that shorter list of companies. And that's the thing that has helped us have the hit rate we've had. And now the next vision for Ensemble, now that it's kind of been working quite well, is how do we scale that up so that we actually can make a dent in the universe where we can actually maybe impact the asset class more wholly. And so we're kind of figuring that piece out now too. So there's always that next thing, like I mentioned, right? So it's like, hey, it's working pretty well. Now we have something else we've got to go do.
But that's what fires you up, man. That's when you come live. You turn your volume up when you start talking about, all the different pieces that can be put together, which maybe minutia is not something for guys like you and me, but you have to have the team to help with the minutia, and that way you can stay focused on the big picture. What's a deal that you've never seen that would, like a type of deal that would excite you? Maybe somebody's watching this today and they want to get in front of you, but what kind of deal in your world would fire you up?
Yeah, I'm really revved up by cheaper robotics paired with AI and machine learning right now. We've done a couple companies in that space. One, for example, is Saronic. It's a company that builds autonomous boats for the Navy, much cheaper boats than what the Navy pays for boats, but it's also paired with autonomy and, new advances in AI. That's a super interesting space. But I mean, we're generalists. I'm just looking for the best team, no matter where they are. And so we've done a bunch of fintech, we've done a bunch in enterprise software, consumer, robotics, and it's all about where the great teams are headed. And right now, I mean, obviously AI is very interesting. It's hard to figure out what to invest in because there's so many of the companies, but there's a lot of breakthroughs that are real in that space. And so we're just kind of sorting through that and spending a lot of time there.
Explain AI to my mom.
To
And
your mom?
explain for or to me, like to someone who maybe I integrate it, right, but it's not a part of my day to day like it is yours. But is it a brace for impact situation? Is it a embrace the change? How would you go and describe to someone who's not living it like you are every single day? Even like robotics, all these things that are such big words, right? It's like we're living in the Jetsons. But how would you prepare people for what's to come?
Well, there's a lot of fear with AI. And as we know, fear is the what? The mind killer.
Mm.
And I can, let me do like a quick diatribe on fear. I think that we are built to be very fear driven creatures.
Mm.
And the reason is 100 out of 100 of all of our ancestors, when they heard a sound in the woods, they ran away. And if it was only 99%, we wouldn't exist. And so we're really built on, we're kind of prey animals almost in many ways, that we're just thrust in the apex of the animal kingdom. And so fear really drives us, and we're really overweighted towards fear. And so, and that's why whenever you see the most successful people tend to be able to shut that off. And AI, actually, politics is perfect. I mean, politics is, it's all about selling fear of the other side. And that's why it becomes so tribal. We're really in group versus out group bias. We always want to be on the in group. So it's hard to be on the out group, because historically, if you get kicked out of the tribe, that basically means certain death because you're stuck alone on the plains. And so we're really fearful of going against the grain publicly. And we're just way over fearful. And so AI is a really good example of this because it's huge change, right? And so it's really easy for our imaginations to just go, oh my gosh, this is going to steal all our jobs. It's going to do all these horrible things. And I tend to take the other side of that coin. And even though my brain naturally wants to be a little bit fearful, it's like, no, I'm just going to be optimistic about it. What AI does is, what it really means for everyone is a giant leap in productivity for our GDP. That's what it means. I mean, incredible leaps in productivity, and productivity is effectively the big compounder for what turns into wealth. So there is a world, and this is super optimistic, there is a world where everything is almost post-economic because it's solved by AI. Right now, what AI actually means is it's just machine learning. It's the same thing that we learned in stats at SMU. It's just with more factors and more data. And so they're really just generally these like tree algorithms or regression algorithms. But what we're seeing now with breakthroughs in LLMs is just how high quality the results can be. Interesting stat. Something like, I think it was about 18, 24 months ago, LLMs, when they took an IQ test, they scored like a 60 an IQ test, which, the average is 100. So it's way below average. About 12 months ago, it scored an 80. And about 6 months ago, it scored 101. So that trend line. So now the typical LLM is actually smarter on an IQ test than the average human. And that trend line looks like this.
Wow.
And so what is it? I mean, what does it look like in 2, 3? I mean, I'm sure it'll flatten a bit, but what does that look like 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now? I mean, likely smarter than anything that we can actually test, right? And so, what's most interesting about AI is actually super intelligence. People define AGI as basically, is it basically indistinguishable from a human? And super intelligence is a little bit different. It doesn't have to be indistinguishable from a human, but it can actually help us identify. It can actually just be smarter than everyone on Earth. And so, there's all sorts of cataclysmic, interesting insights that'll happen from that whenever we actually have given rise to something that's smarter than anything on Earth. And what that means is gigantic productivity gains. The fear-driven argument is, it's going to take over and kill us or something. That's kind of intense. I don't think we're anywhere near that.
Can I ask a question on that?
Yeah.
So again, you've put yourself in literal situations that are risking your life, and then sometimes we put ourselves in situations where it's maybe reputational risk, right? And people are kind of betting on us. Do you have any tricks that you do with yourself when you're in the eye of the storm, literally, or maybe you're fighting through some fundraising or some obstacles with these businesses that are growing? What's your trick?
Yeah, I mean, our anxiety is when we get anxiety at work or in life, it's literally that fear reflex where we literally think we're going to die. That's why we do that. And the literal trick for me is I literally almost died in the Arctic a bunch of times. And so it's, you just kind of go back to that. And it's like, I'm not going to die. It's going to be fine, man. You're not going to die. We live in a modern world now. We don't have to react that way. Take a deep breath, do a little meditation. Like, this is not that important. If it's not as big as you're making it, if it's not going to be as big of a deal for you in 5 years as you're making it right now, don't spend more than 5 minutes on it.
What was the commandment? Keep it moving.
Default movement, baby.
Default movement.
Yeah.
Smart. Keep rowing. Maybe is your thing.
Yeah. Just keep rowing.
So cliche questions I got to ask you. What's the best advice you've ever received?
Oh, shoot. I think the most important thing I've learned is about compounding and how everything compounds. I don't know, man.
Well, then here, I'll reword it.
Yeah.
You got Collin West from 20 years ago or Collin West today, somebody that wants to do something substantial. And
I got for that one.
Okay, what's the advice you would give to somebody?
Life is just a game of Plinko. So Price is Right. You put the puck in and it bounces around, gets to the bottom.
Dude, I'm very familiar. Yes.
Yeah, but you have an audience. I'm explaining to like a 13-year-old. Who probably hasn't. So what Plinko is it's a decision tree. And because a decision tree is yes, no, and it's just yes, no's all the way down. And so when we were graduating SMU, it felt like the biggest deal picking your job. Because it's the first big boy or girl decision you make. You're going out into the real world. If you don't get this right, how am I going to end up? And actually what life is a whole bunch of decisions where you kind of make a path over time. And so it's all about just getting moving and starting to make decisions and go out there and experience things. And so I wish I knew that earlier, because I would have gotten a whole lot of more reps earlier on. Now I feel like I'm actually doing a whole lot of decisions and moving quite quickly, but probably lost a decade on that.
All right. I like it. Here's a big one that I have a feeling I know how you're going to answer. Balance. Is there such thing as balance as a business owner, as a dad, as a husband, as someone who obsesses over success, but maybe has a little bit of fear-driven anxiety about things not all working? Is there balance?
No.
Yeah.
Life is just crazy. I mean, if you're doing interesting things, what is balance? I mean, there's a poet, I'm forgetting his name. I can send it to you for notes. But he says, pick what you love and let it kill you, which is pretty intense, by the way. Just find something you love and just get absorbed in it. That ADD hyperfocus helps for this. And so for me, it's obvious, it's my health, my family, and my work. And all of it blends together. So when I'm doing work, I'm going on, hikes with people that I'm meeting with, stuff like that. You just kind of blend it all together and you just try and do as much as you can.
If you were an animal, what would you be?
Oh, okay. So I like to think that I would like to be like a gazelle, because they just kind of
Wow.
prance and just to make it look so easy. It's more of an aspirational animal in my mind. It's not what I actually am. Like I aspire to look like I'm doing things with grace and it's easy and I'm just enjoying it. But I think in reality, I'm probably a little bit more like I don't know, not that.
If you were a dinosaur, I see that you have some skulls.
Yeah, man. These are my dinosaur skulls. I just went to Tucson and met the guy that dug them up. This is a mosasaurus skull, 71 million years old, if you can believe it.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, dude. And this one is a Silosaurus. This actually predates dinosaurs, before dinosaurs. 210 million years old.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Those would last for 10 seconds in our house. We have dogs and kids. Those things would be a puzzle by the time the podcast was over.
I bet they would.
That's awesome. Couple questions. Legacy. Let's talk worldly legacy and personal legacy, and then professional legacy. When you look back, how do you want to leave it?
Yeah, just leave it better than you did. Maybe make an impact in some way. I think I just watched it. It's actually kind of depressing. I was like, the question was, do you know your great grandfather's name?
Oof. No.
Exactly. It's like, it doesn't matter. You're like very low odds 50 years after your death, anyone even knows your name. And so like live today, do what you need to do. Love the people you love, make an impact the way you can. You're only here now. In 25 years, another interesting insight was in 25 years from today, do you think you'd trade everything you have, all monetary possession, to come back to today to be as time wealthy as you are today? And the answer is almost certainly yes, right? You would trade everything to be 25 years younger when you're older. And so just try and live today that way. So I'm just spending a lot of time thinking about trying to kind of going back to our earlier conversation, live in the moment and like be present, because it's as good as it's going to get.
Do you know a guy named Craig Lewis by chance? He's a Dallas guy.
No.
He has a company called Gig Wage. He's an awesome guy. He's just a great leader. And he did the podcast like 2 years ago. And it was one of those moments where, again, like we kind of go through best advice, tell me your story, and everyone's story is different. And his advice or his thought was, you die twice. Have you heard this?
Last time someone utters your name.
Yeah. And I was like, what the hell? It just floored me. And I was like, man, do you know your great grandpa's name?
No, I need to.
That's crazy.
I don't. No one knows their great grandfather's name. I've asked a bunch of people now.
Golly, well, I know mine is not Rogers, so I can at least eliminate that. The last question: how do we best support you? Whether it's a potential investor, it's a founder, it's someone who wants to follow your journey. How do we best support the Collin West, revolution?
I think it's more, how do we support startups better? Right. And I think like the way we do it is just being authentically ourselves. And like by that, we find the companies that make sense for us to invest in rather than following everybody else, and do what makes the most sense for us. And then just, be kind to founders because they're working really hard. And I think that makes all boats rise. And I just want the asset class to do well, man, because if it does well, it's good for the world.
Actually, one more question.
Yeah.
What's the most important check when raising money?
Oh, baby. The first check.
Yeah.
It's the first check. Because it takes a company from an idea to a company. So those investors out there that write that check, that the founders are opening up a bank account to accept, those are the most important checks in venture by far. And 90% of the net new jobs created, so job creation over 90%, I think it's like 97% of net new jobs created in the global economy are by companies less than 5 years of age. So if you want job creation, you need new companies. If you want new companies, you need people that are willing to write the first check into an idea. And so that's why it's the most important check. And those are the people doing the most important work in venture.
I love it, man. You're a wise man. I almost said a wise guy. So I guess it's not a compliment. You're a wise man, and you're so relatable, and I'm so proud of you. What website for Ensemble? Please remind us of the website.
Yeah, ensemble.vc. Come check us out. Look me up. If you've got an interesting company, I'm always excited to hear about it.
Love it. Well, Collin West, thank you. Great job. Excited to share your story.
Thanks for having me, man.